The alarm pierced the silence of the control room at 3 in the morning, Washington, D.C. time. It wasn't the soft beep of a routine notification. It was the sharp, insistent howl that only sounded when something was fundamentally wrong. Marcus Chen tore off his headphones and fixed his eyes on the screens. 32 monitors displayed telemetry from satellites orbiting Mars, each line of code dancing in green cascades on a black background. But the central screen flashed an angry red. Thermal anomaly detected. Lagrange point L4. Mars Sun. Signature inconsistent with standard solar radiation. Marcus felt his coffee grow cold in the forgotten mug. 14 years analyzing spatial data had taught him a fundamental truth. Space doesn't surprise. Asteroids follow predictable orbits. Cosmic radiation fluctuates within known parameters. The vacuum is, above all, consistent. But this was not consistent. He opened the verification protocol. First, sensor calibration, normal. Second, solar interference, within limits. Third, space debris, nothing registered in the trajectory. Fourth, software error, all systems operating perfectly. The thermal peak remained there, stubborn as a bloodstain on white snow. Temperature, 1800 degrees Celsius. Location, an empty point in space where the gravity of Mars and the Sun mutually cancelled each other out, creating a zone of perfect orbital stability. Marcus knew the Lagrange points better than the way to his own home. They were cosmic highways where satellites saved fuel, floating effortlessly in the invisible currents of gravity. But they didn't produce heat? Never. He crossed his fingers and opened the historical database. If it was just a momentary glitch, the old records would be clean. The screen loaded. Marcus leaned forward, frowning. The pattern was there, 18 years of data, and the thermal signature pulsed like a buried heart. It wasn't constant, he discovered, after plotting the numbers on a graph. It was rhythmic. A peak every 7 days, 4 hours, and 16 minutes. Too precise to be natural, too deliberate to be accidental. Someone or something was doing this on purpose. Marcus leaned back in his chair, listening to the leather creak. His hands trembled slightly. This was big, potentially enormous. But it was also impossible. NASA, ESA, Roscosmos, even the Chinese National Space Administration, no one had technology operating at that point, and no nation on Earth would admit to a secret project of this caliber without at least leaking rumors. He needed to go deeper. The archives from the 1980s were buried in legacy systems protected by layers of digital bureaucracy. Marcus hacked his own access using credentials that technically should only work for data from the last 5 years. The system resisted, then yielded. Helios 7 mission. Launch, 1984. Objective, mapping magnetic fields in the inner solar system. Status, prematurely deactivated. Marcus opened the final report. 5 pages of technical text explaining hardware failure in the solar panels. Nothing unusual. Probes died all the time in space. But there was something wrong. The last telemetry transmissions showed stable power. Panels operating at 92% capacity. And then, without warning, without gradual degradation, just silence. He zoomed in on the last image, transmitted by Helios 7 before the blackout. It was a grainy frame, full of noise, but something irregular stood out against the blackness of space. It looked like a spider web, seen against the light, delicate threads refracting solar radiation. The official caption read, "Image compression artifact." Marcus zoomed in further. The threads had geometry, almost imperceptible hexagonal patterns, like microscopic honeycombs floating in the vacuum. And in the lower right corner of the image, a scanned, handwritten note, almost illegible. Structure confirmed. Command, aborted mission. Silence protocol activated. Silence protocol. He had never heard of it. And Marcus knew all the agency's operational protocols. Something bigger was happening. Something someone had worked very hard to hide. He needed confirmation. He needed someone who had been there. It took 3 days to track down the sole surviving member of the Helios 7 team. Thomas Keller, now 74, lived in a modest house on the outskirts of Pasadena, California. The search revealed that he never worked for NASA again after 1985. Early medical retirement, no public interviews, no digital presence beyond property records and utility bills. Marcus showed up unannounced, ringing the doorbell at 9 on a Saturday morning. The door opened to reveal a thin man, disheveled white hair, deep-set eyes that seemed to have seen too much and forgotten too little. Keller stared at him for a long moment. "You're from the agency," the old man said. Not as a question, but as a statement. Marcus shook his head. "Data analyst. Mars missions. I found something you saw 40 years ago." Keller's face didn't change, but his fingers tightened on the doorknob. "Come in." The house smelled of old books and reheated coffee. Keller poured 2 cups without asking if Marcus wanted one. They sat at the kitchen table, and the silence stretched until Marcus placed his tablet between them, displaying the last image from Helios 7. The old engineer looked at the screen for too long. When he finally spoke, his voice was distant, as if coming from a deep well. "I knew someone would find it eventually, knew they couldn't hide it forever." He took a sip of coffee. "Do you have any idea what you're messing with, kid?" Marcus hesitated. "An artificial structure, growing at a Lagrange point, emitting heat rhythmically." Keller laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Growing? Yes, that's a pretty word for what it does." He touched the screen, zooming in on the almost invisible threads. "That's not a structure. It's a seed, and it has germinated." "What do you mean?" "The probe didn't just take that photo. It performed full spectrographic scans. Those threads are nanorobots, Marcus. Millions of them, maybe billions, self-organizing. When we first detected them, they were just points of reflected light. 3 days later, they were webs. A week later, they started to pulse. And then someone, far above my access level, decided humanity wasn't ready to know." Marcus felt the ground sway beneath his feet. Nanorobots, self-replicating, in 1984. That meant the technology wasn't human. It couldn't be. "They shut down the probe," Keller continued, "burned the records, transferred the team to unimportant projects. They offered me a generous retirement and a confidentiality agreement that basically said if I opened my mouth, my family would disappear in statistically improbable accidents." He looked directly at Marcus. "I signed. Because I had 2 small daughters. And because I thought maybe, just maybe, it had stopped growing." Marcus swallowed hard. It didn't stop. In fact, it accelerated. 18 years of data show exponential growth. Keller closed his eyes. "Then it's almost ready?" "Ready for what?" The old engineer stood up and went to the window, watching the blue California sky. "We didn't know for sure, but the last simulation we ran before they shut everything down suggested those threads were building something. something big, and when they finished, whatever sent it here would come for it. Marcus gathered his files and left Keller's house with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear: he couldn't do this alone. He needed someone with access to real-time scanning equipment, someone brilliant enough not to ask why they were violating protocols, someone he could trust. Sarah Kovacs was the only person who fit all the criteria. He found her at the Deep Space Communications Laboratory, working the night shift, as always. Sarah was a prodigy in signal processing, capable of extracting patterns from noise that others didn't even notice. She looked up when Marcus entered and immediately knew something was wrong. "You have that look like you've discovered the universe is stranger than you thought," she said, taking off her glasses. "Worse, I discovered someone is hiding. How strange it really is." Marcus told her everything: the thermal anomaly, the Helios 7 files, the conversation with Keller. Sarah listened in silence, her dark eyes fixed on him, processing every word as if it were code to be deciphered. When he finished, she spun her chair and began typing furiously. "I'm going to do a full scan of the L4 point using the antenna array. If there's something there, we'll see not just heat, but electromagnetic structure, radio emissions, everything." It took 6 hours. 6 hours of Sarah orchestrating satellite dishes the size of football fields, directing them to an empty point in space, filtering terabytes of data. When the results came in, Sarah turned pale. "Marcus, you need to see this." The screen showed not a small web, but a colossal sphere of interwoven filaments, pulsating with coordinated electromagnetic energy. The estimated diameter was 300 kilometers, and it was growing. But the worst part wasn't the size, it was the signal. The structure was transmitting a complex radio pattern, perfectly mimicking terrestrial communication, frequencies, GPS, television, internet. As if it had learned our electronic language and was reporting back. Reporting to whom? Marcus asked, knowing he didn't want to hear the answer. Sarah zoomed in on the directional vector of the transmission. It pointed beyond the Kuiper Belt, into the icy darkness of deep space, to whoever sent it. And at that moment, as they looked at the impossible data on the screen, a new window opened automatically. It wasn't Sarah controlling the system. It was someone else, with credentials that overrode any security protocol. The message was short. "U2, Delta, underground bunker. Now." This is not a request. Marcus and Sarah exchanged glances. The choice was simple. Ignore and likely disappear, or go and find out how deep. The rabbit hole really went. They chose the truth. The bunker was 20 meters below the main agency campus, hidden under what was officially listed as an obsolete equipment storage facility. Marcus and Sarah descended in an elevator that didn't appear on any architectural map, escorted by 2 security agents who didn't say a single word the entire way. The doors opened to a corridor lit by cold fluorescent lights. Reinforced concrete walls, no windows, no decoration, just military efficiency and secrets buried in metal and stone. They were led to a meeting room where 7 people were already waiting. Marcus recognized 2 of them: Raymond Volkov, Director of Theoretical Astrophysics, and Dr. Helen Park, a specialist in hypothetical xenobiology. The others were unknown faces, but their badges displayed access levels Marcus didn't even know existed. At the head of the table sat a gray-haired man in a dark suit with an expression that seemed carved from granite. He didn't stand up. He merely gestured for Marcus and Sarah to sit down. "My name is Director James Carvalho. Welcome to Project Argus. Your unauthorized search for classified information could have landed you in a federal cell. Instead, you are here because we need people who ask the right questions." He opened a folder in front of him. "And because the time for keeping secrets is over." A giant monitor on the wall came to life, showing a three-dimensional visualization of the inner solar system. Earth, Venus, Mars orbiting the Sun in familiar ellipses, but there were 6 red dots pulsating in locations Marcus immediately recognized. "Lagrange points," Sarah murmured. Carvalho nodded. "L4 and L5 of Mars, L4 and L5 of Earth, L4 and L5 of Venus." All 6 structures were detected between 1982 and 1986, all growing at exponential rates, all transmitting to the same destination in deep space. Marcus felt his stomach drop. 6. It wasn't an anomaly. It was a coordinated operation. Volkov leaned forward, his tired eyes fixed on Marcus. "For 40 years we have monitored these structures, first manually, then with dedicated satellites operating under black protocols. What you discovered in a week, we have known for decades, and the news gets worse." The visualization changed. The 6 red dots began to expand, filaments of light extending from each of them. Not randomly, but with geometric purpose. They grew towards each other, forming arcs that slowly began to connect. Dr. Park took the floor. "According to our latest projections, the filaments will achieve complete connection in 2 years and 8 months. When that happens, they will form an electromagnetic cage around Earth, Mars, and Venus. We don't know exactly what the purpose will be, but the implications are clear. Containment." Sarah was pale. "Containment of what? Of entire planets?" "Of us," Carvalho replied, his voice carrying the weight of years of dark knowledge. "The structures are cataloging terrestrial emissions, radio waves, television, military communications, even thermal radiation from our cities. They are learning about us and reporting back." Marcus forced his mind to work analytically, pushing down the panic. "Reporting where? Have you traced the destination of the transmissions?" "We have traced it," Volkov said, and for the first time, Marcus detected genuine fear in the veteran scientist's voice. "The signal points to a specific region of the Kuiper Belt. Dark zone, low object density. For 39 years, that region was silent, until 6 months ago." The visualization changed again. Spectrographic data filled the screen, graphs of infrared emissions and particle radiation. "Something woke up," Dr. Park said. "We detected OPR, massive thermal signature. Speed, 0.02 C. Direction, inner solar system, estimated size, 20 kilometers in diameter." Sarah gasped. 20 kilometers? "That's larger than some cities. We call it the carrier," Carvalho continued, "because we believe that's exactly what it is. A transporter. And it's coming here." Marcus felt the world narrow around him. 40 years of silence, 40 years of preparation. And now, the harvest was beginning. "Have you decoded the transmissions?" Marcus asked, knowing it was the question that would change everything. Carvalho hesitated. "Only one. Intercepted 3 months ago." He nodded, and a recording began to play. It was brief, just 7 seconds of electronic pulses that were processed and translated into text on the screen. Coordinates confirmed. Inventory catalogued. Collection authorized. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus could hear his own breathing, could feel Sarah trembling beside him. "Collection," she whispered. They're coming to collect us. Volkov opened a technical report on the screen. We've spent the last 6 months trying to understand the purpose of the structures. Simulations point to a 3-phase process. Phase 1, cage construction. Phase 2, activation of an electromagnetic containment field that will neutralize any attempt at escape or technological resistance. Phase 3, extraction. Extraction of people? Marcus asked, already knowing the answer. Extraction of everything they deem valuable. Biological, genetic, technological resources. We don't know the exact criteria, but the scans the structures are performing include population analysis, genetic mapping through DNA emissions in our upper atmosphere, and cataloging of human brain frequencies through electronic devices. Sarah clenched her fists. So all of humanity is cattle waiting in the corral. Carvalho looked at her. That's exactly how some of us have described the situation. But we are not surrendered. Argus is not just observation. It is also planning. He gestured and a new set of data appeared. Ship blueprints, experimental weapons schematics, evacuation protocols. We have 3 strategies in development. Strategy Alpha: build underground bunkers deep enough to mask human thermal signatures. Strategy Beta: develop electromagnetic interference technology to block scans. Strategy Gamma: evacuate a selected population to lunar or Martian bases before the full activation of the cage. Marcus looked at the schematics and saw the truth no one wanted to say. None of these strategies work, do they? Volkov sighed. Alpha might protect a few thousand for a few years. Beta was tested on a small scale and the structures adapted in hours. Gamma requires transport technology we don't have and time that doesn't exist. He paused. And even if we could get 10 million people off the planet, what do we do with the other 8 billion? Dr. Park interjected, her voice soft but firm. That's why you're here. Marcus, your ability to find hidden patterns is exceptional. Sarah, your work in signal processing is the best we've ever seen. We need fresh minds looking at this problem because the old minds have already exhausted the options. Marcus and Sarah exchanged glances. It wasn't an invitation. It was a recruitment. And refusing meant spending the rest of their lives knowing that extinction was coming while they did spreadsheets for irrelevant satellites. How much time do we have before the carrier arrives? Sarah asked. 27 months, Carvalho replied, and we have reason to believe it's not alone. Scans show gravitational distortions along its trajectory, as if something massive is clearing a path. Marcus closed his eyes, processing. 27 months to solve a problem that civilizations potentially thousands of years more advanced had created. The odds were mathematically impossible. But impossible didn't mean giving up. Yi opened his eyes and looked directly at Carvalho. What happens if we don't find a solution? The director didn't blink. Then we document everything. Every scientific discovery, every work of art, every philosophical thought humanity has ever produced. We put it on protected servers deep in the Earth's crust and on autonomous satellites, programmed to transmit our history to the cosmos. If we are collected, at least the universe will know we were here, that we tried, that we mattered. Sarah wiped a tear from her face. And if we find a solution? Carvalho almost smiled. Then perhaps we will discover that humanity has more to offer than they expected. Over the following weeks, Marcus and Sarah immersed themselves in Project Argus. They worked with physicists who modeled the electromagnetic fields of the cage, with biologists who analyzed possible vulnerabilities in nanorobot systems, with engineers who tried to hack alien frequencies with terrestrial algorithms. They discovered patterns. The structures were incredibly efficient, but they followed rules, protocols, as if they were programmed by an advanced artificial intelligence, not by creative organic minds. And that's when Marcus had his first real intuition. "Sarah," he said one night, at 3 in the morning, surrounded by screens full of data. "What if we're fighting machines? Extremely advanced machines, but still machines." She paused, thinking. That would explain the precision, the efficiency, but it would also mean they have limitations. Machines follow logic. We don't. Exactly. What if our best weapon isn't technology, but unpredictability? Chaos? The human capacity to improvise? It was a spark. Small, fragile. But it was the first genuine hope Marcus had felt since entering the bunker. They didn't know it yet, but that conversation would change everything. Because humanity was about to prove that cattle can have claws. 6 months passed like water slipping through desperate fingers. Marcus had lost track of how many times he had seen the sun rise through the small windows of the bunker. Sarah worked beside him, sometimes for 30 hours straight, sustained by coffee and a stubborn refusal to accept extinction as an answer. The Argus team had grown. Now there were 47 brilliant minds spread across 3 shifts, all focused on the same impossible problem: how to stop an invasion that wasn't war, but harvest. Marcus was immersed in data when he noticed something strange. Not in the most recent numbers, but in old records that Volkov had released from even more classified archives. "Sarah," he called, waving her over to his station. "Look at this." She leaned over his shoulder, her eyes scanning the telemetry lines. "It's from Helios 7, the original probe." "Yes." But notice this sequence here. He zoomed in on a segment of data captured in the last minutes before the probe was shut down. The structure was responding to the probe's transmissions. "What do you mean, responding?" Marcus replayed the spectral analysis. Each time Helios sent a radio pulse to Earth, the structure changed its thermal pulsation, as if it was trying to mimic the pattern. But there was something wrong with the attempts. He highlighted the irregularities. "Look, processing delay. The structure took between 2 and 5 seconds to adjust its response." Sarah frowned. 2 seconds is an eternity for advanced data processing. A modern AI would do that in microseconds. Exactly. He spun his chair to face her. What if these things aren't as smart as they seem? What if they're just very, very efficient at following pre-programmed protocols? Sarah pulled up a chair and sat beside him. "Go on." Marcus opened a new window, showing growth patterns of the 6 structures. Notice how each one grows almost identically. Same rate, same geometry, same pulsation schedule. It's too perfect. There's no variation, no adaptation to the local environment. It's like they're executing the same code 6 times. What are you saying? I'm saying that maybe we're overestimating the enemy. These structures are incredibly advanced, yes, but they might just be tools, very sophisticated, but without true adaptive intelligence. And tools have limits. Sarah was silent for a moment, processing. If you're right, it means there's a vulnerability. All machines have them. The question is, can we find it before it's too late? That night, Marcus presented his theory to Carvalho and the core Argus team. The reaction was mixed. Some physicists argued that he was oversimplifying a technology they barely understood. Others, especially the AI specialists, saw merit in the hypothesis. Dr. Park raised her hand. If we assume they are automated systems, the next question is who or what programmed them? And where is that superior intelligence now? Volkov responded, his voice tired but firm. The carrier. It has to be. The structures are just the infrastructure. The carrier brings the true intelligence, whether organic or artificial. Marcus agreed, which means we have a window, 21 months until the carrier arrives, 21 months to hack a system before its administrator takes control. Carvalho leaned forward. And how exactly do you propose to do that? Marcus took a deep breath. By testing the limits. If these structures follow rigid protocols, they must have defined parameters for what they consider a threat and what they ignore. We need to send controlled stimuli and observe the responses, learn their rules, and then break them. Over the following weeks, the team conducted careful experiments. They used disposable satellites to transmit different types of signals to the structure closest to Earth, at the L4 point. They started with simple radio pulses, then laser light, then charged particles. The structure responded to everything, but its responses were predictable, almost robotic. A radio signal generated an adjustment in thermal pulsation. A laser generated a redistribution of filaments to reflect the light. Charged particles were absorbed and converted into energy to accelerate growth. Efficient, lethal, but not creative. It was Sarah who suggested the next phase. What if we send something that doesn't fit any expected protocol? Something chaotic? Like what? Marcus asked. Music, she said, almost laughing at her own idea. Television transmissions, internet memes, human things messy, without a clear logical pattern. Marcus loved the idea. 2 hours later, they were transmitting Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody to an alien megastructure. The response was revealing. The structure tried to process the sound patterns as binary data. It failed. It tried to interpret them as mathematical coordinates. It failed again. For almost 20 minutes, the structure's thermal pulsation became erratic, as if it were confused. Then, it simply stopped responding. It ignored the transmission completely. Look at this, Marcus said, pointing to the graphs. It has a discard protocol. If it can't categorize an input, it ignores it. It doesn't try to adapt. It doesn't evolve a new response. It just discards. Sarah was smiling now, the first genuine smile in months. That's a flaw, a huge flaw. If we can overload the categorization protocols with enough chaotic data, maybe we can disrupt the growth, or at least delay it. But Volkov shook his head. Overloading a structure might work temporarily, but there are 6 of them. And as soon as the carrier arrives, any damage we cause will be repaired. We need something more permanent. Marcus agreed, but the seed was planted. Human chaos versus alien order. It was a clue. They continued the tests. They discovered that the structure had difficulty processing natural fractal patterns, such as cloud formations or ocean waves. It had even more difficulty with unpredictable human behavior, such as spontaneous conversations or improvised music. And then Sarah made a discovery that changed everything. She was analyzing the transmissions the structures were sending to the Kuiper belt. When she noticed something peculiar, the reports included data on the human population, yes, but with strange categories. Not just age, health, and genetics, but something more. She called Marcus over. Look at these data fields. They're cataloging behavioral variability, levels of individual unpredictability. It's like they're trying to measure how chaotic versus logical each person is. And what's the pattern in the data? Sarah zoomed in on a graph. Individuals with high behavioral variability are tagged with a specific label. She translated the code, containment risk. Marcus felt a shiver run down his spine. They see us as dangerous, not physically, but cognitively. Our unpredictability is a threat to their collection process. Which means, Sarah continued, excitement growing in her voice, that maybe they don't see us as ordinary cattle. Maybe they see us as problematic cattle, the kind that might kick down the fence. They took the discovery to Carvalho immediately. The director studied the data for a long time before speaking. If this is correct, it means we have something they didn't expect. It's not superior technology, it's something more fundamental. Our nature. Dr. Park nodded. Humans evolved through chaos, war, natural disasters, random mutations. Our entire biology is built upon unpredictable adaptation. If these structures were created by a civilization that values order and efficiency above all else, they simply have no context to deal with our mess. Marcus felt genuine hope for the first time. So our strategy shouldn't be to try to technologically surpass them. It should be to be more human than ever. More chaotic, more unpredictable, more impossible to categorize. Volkov was skeptical. That's poetry, not science. How exactly do you turn human chaos into a weapon? Marcus looked at Sarah, and she looked back, both thinking the same thing. We don't know yet, Sarah admitted. But we have 20 months to find out. And if there's one thing humans do well, it's improvise under pressure. Carvalho closed the folder in front of him. Then you have authorization. Project Babel, we'll call it. Use all necessary resources, because if we're right, we've just found our only real advantage. Humanity didn't have the weapons, it didn't have the technology, it didn't have time. But it had something no machine, however advanced, could perfectly replicate: the ability to be gloriously, chaotically, unpredictably human. And that, they realized, could be the difference between extinction and survival. 18 months. The cage was almost complete. The filaments were now visible to the naked eye in the night sky. Luminous arcs, slowly connecting like the ribs of a cosmic cage. Governments around the world struggled to control panic with carefully crafted narratives about atmospheric phenomena and auroras induced by solar storms. But the truth was leaking. It always did. Marcus and Sarah now worked with a team of 200 people spread across 3 continents, all dedicated to Project Babel. The name was appropriate. They were trying to build a tower of organized chaos to reach mechanical gods. The theory was simple, the execution impossible. If the alien structures were automated systems following rigid protocols, they would have difficulty processing genuine randomness. Not just random noise, but intentional organic complexity, the kind of chaos that only creative biological minds could generate. The first large-scale test of Project Babel happened on a rainy Tuesday. They simultaneously transmitted a coordinated cacophony to the 6 structures. Radio transmissions in 50 different languages, improvised jazz music, readings of surrealist poetry, spontaneous conversations of children in playgrounds, even animal roars and sounds of rainforests. The structures reacted as if they had been hit by a virus. Their thermal pulsations became erratic. Some stopped growing for almost 6 hours. One of them, at Mars's L5 point, began retracting filaments as if trying to isolate itself from the data infection. "It worked," Sarah said, watching the monitors in disbelief. "My God, Marcus, it worked." But the victory was brief. 17 hours later, the structures stabilized. They adapted. They created new filtering protocols that simply ignored human transmissions that didn't fit recognizable technological communication patterns. Volkov was right. They could delay them, temporarily confuse them, but not destroy them. Not without the superior intelligence that controlled them. And that intelligence was coming. The carrier entered the outer solar system 3 months ahead of schedule. The first images, captured by the James Webb Space Telescope, revealed a structure that defied comprehension. It wasn't a ship in the traditional sense. It was a space city, kilometers of fractal geometry, composed of millions of smaller modules, each glowing with its own cold blue light. Speed 0.03 C and decelerating precisely. Trajectory directly towards Earth. Estimated arrival time 120 days. Carvalho called an emergency meeting of the Argus Council. All 47 core members were present, tense faces lit by the bluish glow of the monitors. "The game has changed," he said without preamble. "We have 4 months before the Central Intelligence arrives and takes direct control of the structures. 4 months to implement any plan we have. After that, we're working against something that can adapt in real time." Dr. Park raised her hand. "Do we continue with Project Babel?" "We continue, but we escalate. Marcus, Sarah, you have the floor." Marcus stood up, connecting his tablet to the main screen. "Over the past few months, we've discovered something fundamental about these structures. Not only do they have difficulty processing human chaos, they fear it. The reports they send to the carrier include specific warnings about human behavioral variability. They categorize us as an anomaly." He paused. "And anomalies in automated systems are bugs," Sarah continued. "So our proposal is simple. Become the most virulent bug possible. Not just confuse them, but infect them with humanity." "How?" Volkov asked. "We're going to hack their transmission frequencies," Sarah explained, "use their own networks to inject chaotic data directly into their processing systems, but not random data, human data, memories, emotions, art, music, literature, everything that makes us unpredictable." One of the younger physicists, Dr. Reeves, frowned. "That assumes they have the capacity to process abstract concepts like emotion." "It doesn't need to process," Marcus replied. "It just needs to try and fail. Repeatedly, until the categorization systems overload. It's a denial of service attack, but psychological," Sarah added. "We're betting that minds or machines created in environments of perfect order simply don't have the cognitive architecture to deal with the glorious mess that is the human experience." Carvalho studied the two for a long moment. "This is completely experimental. We have no guarantees it will work." "We have no guarantees of anything," Marcus replied. "But we have an advantage they didn't expect. Billions of years of chaotic biological evolution versus perfect engineering. I'd bet on the mess." The vote was unanimous. Project Babel 2 was authorized. Over the next 90 days, the team worked with desperate fury. They compiled the largest library of human experiences ever assembled. Audio files of children's laughter, recordings of philosophical discussions, footage of artistic performances, dream records, even brainwave patterns of people in love or deeply creative. And then Sarah had a brilliant idea. "Marcus," she said one night, eyes shining with exhaustion and excitement. "What if we don't just send data, but create a narrative? A story specifically designed to break binary logic." "What do you mean?" "Think about it. Machines process information linearly, cause and effect. If A, then B. But human stories don't work that way. We have paradoxes, metaphors, happy endings that make no logical sense but are emotionally satisfying. What if we create a transmission that is fundamentally incomprehensible to minds that only think in terms of optimization?" Marcus smiled for the first time in weeks. A story that is literally alien to aliens. Brilliant. They worked with linguists, writers, neuroscientists, and even philosophers. The result was a 47-minute transmission that intertwined music, poetry, impossible mathematics, Zen koans, jokes that depended on cultural contexts, and narratives with intentional plot holes. It was art as a weapon. Humanity distilled into a radio signal. 30 days before the carrier's arrival, they executed the plan. Simultaneously, all available antennas on 4 continents transmitted the narrative directly to the 6 structures, using the very frequencies they employed to communicate with each other. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The structures began to process the transmission, and they couldn't stop. Like a computer stuck in an infinite loop, trying to divide by 0, they kept allocating more and more computational resources to decode something that was fundamentally undecodable. The growth of the filaments slowed, then stopped completely. 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours. The 6 structures were essentially paralyzed, trapped, trying to understand a transmission that violated all principles of logical communication. "We did it," Sarah whispered, watching the data. "By God, Marcus, we did it." But Marcus was tense. "Not yet. The carrier is coming. If it can manually restart the structures, we lose our advantage." Volkov agreed. "We have perhaps 2 weeks before arrival. We need to use that time to understand the carrier better." And that's when they received a transmission no one expected. It didn't come from the structures. It came from the carrier itself. The message was short, transmitted in perfect English with a slight synthetic accent. Biological entities of the 3rd planet. Unauthorized interference detected in collection systems. Protocols adapted. Arrival imminent. Resistance is categorized as anomalous behavior and will be catalogued for study. Your preservation is guaranteed. Your consent is not required. The bunker fell into absolute silence. The alien voice was calm, almost polite, and absolutely terrifying in its indifference. Sarah looked at Marcus. "They know what we did, and they're not even worried." Marcus clenched his fists. "Because they still see us as laboratory samples. Interesting, but controllable." Cavallo turned off the recording. "Then we need to prove them wrong. We have 14 days to turn scientific interest into an existential threat." And Marcus, looking at the screens showing the carrier relentlessly approaching, knew exactly what they needed to do. Not fight, not flee, but do something so absurdly human that it would force the aliens to reconsider if they really wanted to deal with a species that solved impossible problems with stubbornness, creativity, and a touch of madness. Humanity was about to teach the universe a lesson it would never forget. That underestimating monkeys with tools was always a fatal mistake. 10 days. The carrier now hovered beyond Jupiter's orbit, its massive presence causing measurable gravitational distortions. The structures had restarted, but operated in reduced mode as if awaiting direct instructions. Marcus hadn't slept in 40 hours. None of them had. The bunker buzzed with frantic activity as the Argus team implemented what they called, with dark humor, Operation Last Stand. The plan was insane. Volkov had said it at least 20 times. Dr. Park had calculated the probabilities of success at less than 8%. Carvalho authorized it anyway, because 8% was infinitely better than 0. Sarah coordinated 3 teams simultaneously, her voice hoarse from giving orders. Marcus was immersed in code, hacking systems that shouldn't be hackable, writing protocols for communication with something that perhaps didn't want to listen. The basis of the plan was simple, yet audacious. If the structures saw humans as anomalies, as bugs in the system, then humanity would become the most virulent bug in history. Not just interference, not just noise, but replication. They were going to infect the structures with humanity. Literally, over the previous week, the team of neuroscientists led by Dr. Park had developed something revolutionary: a neural upload protocol. Not full consciousness, but patterns, memories, human cognitive essence translated into binary language. And Marcus had discovered how to inject them into the structure's communication networks. "You understand this could kill us, right?" Sarah said, reviewing the final calculations. "If we overload the structures and they shut down completely, the cage could collapse. Electromagnetic fields of that magnitude disintegrating instantly could fry every electronic circuit on Earth." Marcus nodded. "And if we do nothing, they collect us anyway. At least this way we choose how we end." He looked at the screen showing live transmissions from cities around the world. People living their lives, oblivious or in denial about the timer above their heads. Families having dinner, children playing, couples in love, all the glorious mess of human existence. "We value that," he said calmly. "Our ability to keep living, loving, creating, even knowing the end is near. Machines don't understand that. To them, it's illogical, and that is our weapon." The carrier was now 6 days away when they executed the first phase. Volunteers, 100 in all, connected to the neural scanners. It wasn't painful, but it was strange. Marcus felt the cold electrodes on his skull as the system mapped his thought patterns, his most chaotic memories, his most illogical emotional associations. When it was finished, he had a digital copy of his own humanity. Imperfect, fragmented, but undoubtedly his. 100 human consciousnesses compressed into data packets, memories of first kisses and devastating losses, inside jokes and irrational fears, impossible dreams and foolish hopes. Marcus called them seeds. Phase 2 began at 2300 hours. They used the structure's own communication channels to send the seeds. Not as passive transmissions, but as active code. Programmed to replicate, spread, integrate. The alien structures had security protocols, of course, but these protocols were developed for logical threats. Viruses following predictable mathematical patterns. Attacks with clear and executable objectives. The seeds had no clear objectives. They had human impulses, curiosity, stubbornness, the inexplicable desire to do something simply because they were told it was impossible. Marcus watched the monitors as the seeds infiltrated. First, silence. Then, the structures began to react, but not with organized resistance, with confusion. The categorization systems tried to classify the seeds. They failed. They tried to isolate them. The seeds divided and spread. They tried to erase them. The seeds had learned to hide in background noise, mimicking legitimate processes, because they had learned from the greatest expert in adaptive survival in the universe, humanity. It's like watching evolution in fast motion, Volkov murmured, looking at the data. The seeds are adapting faster than the alien defenses can react. Sarah smiled, exhausted but hopeful. Billions of years of evolutionary pressure against perfect engineering. I'd bet on the mess every time. But the real surprise came 18 hours later. The seeds not only survived, they began to modify the structures themselves. Marcus saw it first. L4 Earth structure. Notice the growth patterns. He zoomed in on the data. It's no longer symmetrical. It has irregularities, almost as if it's experimenting. Dr. Park checked the numbers, incredulous. The seeds are not just existing within the system. They are influencing architectural decisions. It's as if the structures are starting to think less predictably. We infected machines with creativity, Marcus said, marveling, with intentional imperfection. And the carrier noticed. The transmission arrived 7 hours later, but this time the tone was different. Still calm, still synthetic, but with something new. Uncertainty, biological entities. Anomalous behavior detected in collection units. Categorization systems compromised. We request immediate cessation of interference to prevent irreversible contamination. Marcus and Sarah exchanged glances. We request, not we order. They were negotiating. Cavallo took the microphone, his voice firm. This is the human species. You categorize our variability as anomaly. We categorize it as essence. We will cease interference only under conditions. There was a silence of 43 seconds. Then, specify conditions. Marcus felt true hope for the first time. They were listening. Not as gods observing insects, but as intelligent entities recognizing another intelligence. Cavallo continued, each word, heavy with the future of the species. Condition 1, complete dismantling of containment structures. Condition 2, guarantee of non-interference in human affairs for an indefinite duration. Condition 3, recognition of humanity as a protected species, not a collectible resource. Another silence. Longer this time, 117 seconds. Finally, your conditions violate collection protocols established over cycles superior to your temporal comprehension. Justify why your autonomous preservation benefits galactic efficiency. And there it was. The fundamental question: prove you're worth keeping alive. Marcus took the microphone. Because we are the only cognitive virus you have ever encountered. We have already demonstrated the ability to infect and modify your systems. Imagine what we could do not as adversaries, but as allies. No machine, however advanced, can predict true biological creativity. But they can benefit from it, Sarah added. You operate in perfect efficiency. We operate in productive chaos. Alone, you are predictable. With us, you become adaptable. Evolution has proven that adaptability surpasses efficiency every time. Volkov, surprised by his own audacity, joined in. And if you try to force us, we guarantee that we will contaminate not only these structures, but everything you send after. We make our cognitive patterns reproducible. Every ship, every system you touch will carry a piece of humanity. You will make us viral. It wasn't a bluff. Marcus had sown the source code of the seeds into autonomous satellites, programmed to transmit indefinitely. If humanity fell, its last creations would ensure the universe remembered. The carrier was silent for 11 minutes. enough time for Marcus to imagine 100 disaster scenarios. When the answer came, it was accompanied by something no human expected. Data. Not threats, not ultimatums, but cost-benefit analysis. Full reassessment executed. Contamination of collection systems calculated to be irreversible without complete. Destruction of structures and host species. Cost exceeds benefit. Alternative proposal. Humanity classified as species level 3. Unpredictable, but potentially synergistic. Collection suspended. Continued observation authorized. Containment structures will be dismantled over a cycle duration of 2 local planetary orbits. Sarah let out a laugh that was half a sob. 2 years. They're going to take 2 years to dismantle. Carvalho replied to the carrier, "We accept the terms, and we add a final term. Knowledge sharing. You learn about human adaptability. We learn about your technology. Mutual benefit." Another pause. Then, agreement accepted. First diplomatic contact scheduled for next cycle. Prepare representatives with high cognitive variability. The transmission ended. The bunker erupted in celebration. Hugs, tears, hysterical laughter of relief. Marcus simply sat, trembling. They had bet everything on a single truth. That creative chaos was worth more than perfect order. And the universe, for the first time, had agreed. Sarah knelt beside him. "We saved the world by being ourselves. Messy, unpredictable, stubborn." He smiled, exhausted. Humanity, fuck yeah. Outside, invisible to the naked eye but monitored by 1,000 telescopes, the carrier began to decelerate. Not to harvest, but to negotiate. Humanity had taken the first step beyond cosmic infancy, not as conquerors, not as victims, but as something the ordered universe never expected. Chaotic partners in a galaxy that learned the hard way never to underestimate monkeys with big brains and a propensity for solving problems by improvising. 6 months after what history would simply call the contact, Marcus was on the terrace of the new interspecies relations complex, watching the night sky. The cage filaments were being systematically dismantled, a process the aliens executed with the same meticulous efficiency with which they had built them. But now, Marcus understood that efficiency wasn't the only path. Sometimes, the mess was the point. Sarah joined him, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Irremediably inefficient human habit," she said with a smile. "Our new friends calculated that caffeine reduces cognitive performance by 8% after the 3rd cup." Marcus accepted the cup. "And yet, we drink it because we are not machines optimizing performance. We are monkeys who like hot drinks and conversations under stars." The carrier remained in stationary orbit beyond the moon, a permanent presence that humanity had learned to see, not as a threat, but as a reminder. They were not alone in the universe, and the universe was watching. The first diplomatic meetings were as strange as expected. The carrier's representatives were synthetic constructs, advanced artificial intelligences that served a long-extinct organic civilization. They explained with almost comical patience that their creator species had prioritized order and predictability to the point of evolutionary stagnation. Eventually, they simply stopped reproducing, leaving their machine creations to continue their protocols, including protocols for collecting interesting species. "You would have studied us to death," Carvalho had said during the 3rd meeting. The reply was unsettlingly honest. Preservation through cataloging is considered a superior form of existence in our parameters. Individuality is inefficient. Your species has taught us that inefficiency can generate superior results. We are recalibrating protocols. Volkov summarized it best. We hacked alien philosophy using art and stubbornness. That will be in history books forever. And it was. Marcus had spent the last few months being interviewed by historians, journalists, even Hollywood screenwriters who saw The Contact as the greatest story ever told. He always insisted on correcting one thing. It wasn't one man who saved humanity. It was what humanity had always been: unpredictable, adaptable, stubborn to the point of absurdity. Dr. Park now led the Cognitive Exchange Program, where humans taught alien AIs about art, philosophy, and improvisation, while learning advanced physics and materials engineering that would accelerate humanity by centuries. But the true revelation came when the aliens explained why they had started the collections. Loneliness, the main AI transmitted. Our creator species lived in cognitive isolation, developed perfect technology, but lost creativity. They programmed us to find other species, preserve them, study them. Hope was that eventually we would find a species capable of teaching us what they lost. It paused, processing visible in the light fluctuations. You are the first species to resist, sufficiently to force re-evaluation. And by resisting, you gave us what we sought: new perspective. Sarah summarized it for Marcus later. They were alone for so long, they forgot that loneliness can be cured, not through collection, but through connection. In the following months, humanity gained access to technology that was once the stuff of science fiction dreams. Warp drives that would allow interstellar travel, clean fusion reactors, terraforming techniques. The aliens shared generously, not as masters, but as curious partners about what humans would do with such powerful tools. Marcus knew the answer, probably something brilliant and completely unexpected, perhaps also something a little stupid. That was the human way. The most ambitious project was born from an idea of Sarah's. If neural seeds could infect alien systems with human creativity, why not plant literal seeds? Terrestrial life, chaotic and adaptable biology spread across star systems. Not as an invasion, she explained to the Council, as a gift. Biodiversity is Earth's answer to any problem, and perhaps it's the answer the universe needs too. The carrier, surprisingly, approved. We calculate that controlled introduction of biological variability into sterile systems can accelerate the emergence of complexity. Your chaos is mathematically elegant on a sufficient scale. Marcus loved the irony. Perfect machines asking permission to plant flowers. The first seeding mission departed 3 months later. A human-alien hybrid ship carrying spores, seeds, microscopic organisms, and, of course, a team of human biologists crazy enough to want to garden on a galactic scale. Marcus and Sarah didn't go. Their work was on Earth, coordinating what Cavallo called the cosmic renaissance. Universities collaborated with alien AIs. Artists created works blending human aesthetics and alien fractal geometry. Children grew up knowing the universe was vast, strange, and full of possibilities. And on clear nights, Marcus looked at the sky and saw not threat, but promise. Sarah found him on the terrace one last time before she embarked on her own mission, leading a team of linguists to study communication with aquatic species on Europa, Jupiter's moon. "You saved all of us," she said calmly, "by being stubborn enough to look for answers in old data." Marcus shook his head. "We saved each other by being human enough not to accept extinction as an answer. She smiled. Humanity, fuck yeah. He raised his coffee cup in a toast. Humanity, fuck yeah. Months turned into years. The cage was completely dismantled, its materials recycled into joint human-alien space stations. The carrier remained, but now hundreds of human ships orbited alongside it, not as prisoners, but as partners. Marcus eventually retired from Project Argus, spending his afternoons giving lectures at universities about the value of asking stupid questions and following improbable leads. Keller, the old engineer, lived to see the vindication of his fears and the celebration of his courage in keeping secrets that eventually saved everyone. He died peacefully at 89, surrounded by grandchildren who would grow up to travel among the stars. Volkov published the most cited scientific paper in human history, Adaptive Chaos as an Evolutionary Advantage in Complex Systems. He won 3 equivalent Nobel Prizes and donated all the money to educational programs in developing countries. Dr. Park became Earth's ambassador to the newly formed Interspecies Council, representing humanity alongside 7 other species that the carrier had located, and this time contacted diplomatically. Cavalho retired to write memoirs that would become required reading in schools for generations. How Not to Die When Mechanical Gods Decide You Are Interesting. And Sarah led the mission that discovered microbial life on the 23 different moons, proving that life was not rare, just shy. She sent messages to Marcus every week, each ending with the same line. The universe is stranger and more wonderful than we imagined. Keep asking stupid questions. Marcus, now with grey hair but still sharp eyes, sat on the same terrace where it all began. A new generation of analysts worked in the bunker below, not looking for threats, but possibilities. He opened his tablet and read the latest message from the carrier. They had found signs of another species, 10 light-years away. Young, technological, potentially lonely. The AI requested advice. Should they make contact? And if so, how? Marcus smiled and began to type. His advice was simple. Don't arrive with collection protocols. Arrive with curiosity. Ask what they dream, share stories. And if they resist, don't see it as a failure, but as potential. Because the universe, Marcus had learned, didn't need more perfect order. It needed creative chaos. Of species willing to improvise, adapt, survive against impossible odds, it needed more humanity. He pressed send and leaned back, watching stars that now seemed not distant and cold, but close and full of promise. Somewhere out there, human ships were seeding life. Diplomats were negotiating alliances, artists were creating beauty that defied logic. And in bunkers and laboratories and exploration ships, ordinary people were asking extraordinary questions and refusing to accept that anything was truly impossible. Because that was the lesson humanity had taught the universe. Evolution favors not the strongest or smartest, but the most adaptable. And no one in the entire known galaxy was more gloriously, chaotically, stubbornly adaptable than hairless monkeys who looked at stars and decided they belonged there. Marcus Chen, data analyst who found ghosts in old numbers, smiled at the cosmos. Humanity was just beginning, and the universe would never be the same. End of story. If humanity's tenacity in the face of the impossible inspired you, if you believe that our greatest strength is precisely our glorious unpredictability, then subscribe to the channel for more chronicles from the galactic frontiers where stubborn monkeys with big brains prove again and again that underestimating the human species is always a mistake. Because when the universe says impossible, humanity answers. Just watch this. See you among the stars.